State-dependent learning. It's why people, when they play pool, they typically get pretty wasted. I've seldom ever seen someone play pool sober, and it's not a quinky dink. They learned the trajectories. They learned how to play while they were in a different state of mind. So that when they leave that state of mind, in a way, they forget it. They're not quite as proficient at it, and that is what I'm facing here, just a little bit. Without that liquor, I can't quite remember what it is like to orate. So I am learning. Magnus himself is in very many states, though this is not due to any sort of material or corporal intoxication, but rather many different states trapped in many different versions of himself. This is a twin flame, a sort of hybrid, a weird mutant. A planet-wide state of emergency had been declared on Morningstar 6 Terran Standard months previously. The first sign of the impending disaster came when a building atmospheric disturbance suddenly developed into a raging magnetic cyclone that ripped a 12,000 kilometer swath of devastation across the southern hemisphere. At first, this storm was believed to be an anomaly, a once-in-a-lifetime tragic occurrence, never to be expected again. 6 days later, local defense forces were scrambled to investigate a total failure of power in the high belts of equatorial region. Tens of thousands died as coolant units failed and hydro recycling facilities ceased functioning. A weaponized electromagnetic detonation was suspected, and members of an outlaw cult known as the Sons of Shaitan were named as the principal suspects, a relic from the days when men still put their faith in gods and demons. Its tattooed members preached a doomsday doctrine that welcomed this apocalypse as a sign they were soon to sit at the right hand of their golden deity. But the truth was far worse. Mechanism investigations revealed that the source of the power failure had to be localized. High gradient reversal of the magnetic fields generated in Morningstar's core. Fluctuations in a planet's magnetic field were not uncommon, though incidents of such focus strength were virtually unknown. With 3 more incidents occurring over the next 7 days, enough data was generated by the Mechanicum Geologicus for its adepts to identify the nature of these disasters. Morningstar was in the midst of an ultra-rapid geomagnetic polarity reversal. Such events were common to all planets, with the periods between each shift lasting somewhere in the region of 500,000 years or thereabouts. Reversals in polarity typically took centuries to complete, and were so gradual as to pass all but unnoticed by the planet's inhabitants. The Mechanicum's best-case scenario put the length of this reversal at 6 months. What was causing this hyper-accelerated reversal was unknown, but its effects were devastating. Magnus storms ripped through the atmosphere with increasing regularity and ferocity, disrupting power grids all across the planet. For 3 rotations, every light in Morningstar was snuffed out by a planet-wide electromagnetic hurricane, with only firelight to keep the darkness at bay. A magnetic static hash of screaming voices disrupt all but the most powerful Vox systems, and riots erupted as a score of cities as food and water distribution ground to a halt. Violent seismic activity tore the planet's crust into forking split lines. Morningstar's largest hive conurbation, built straddling a geometric fissure, had sunk into the fiery chasm that once supplied its power needs when the groaning tectonic plate broke apart. That same earthquake drowned another 3 coastal cities beneath tsunamis hundreds of meters high. The planet's population was quartered in a single month. If such disasters were not bad enough, Mechanicum theorists predicted an ultra-rapid erosion of Morningstar's atmosphere, resulting in lethal levels of solar radiation. Faced with the prospect of mass extinction, the imperial governor, Conrad Varga, decreed Morningstar lost and broadcast evacuation protocols on every functioning box. On the planetary capital of Kalina, they retained a functioning starport with the capacity to handle a large-scale evacuation. Within hours of Varga's broadcast, the planet's populace were making their way to the last refuge to secure passage off-world. They arrived over the next couple weeks, and their hundreds of thousands, and the people of Kalina opened their doors to everyone. And when the city quickly became full, well-planned refugee camps were built into its surrounding environs, spiraling cities of canvas and plasfex shelters. And when the cities, the port facilities of Kalina were robust and extensive, but it swiftly became clear that Morningstar's fleet assets were woefully ill-equipped and insufficient to effect a mass evacuation. Appeals for salvation were hurled into the depths of space via dreaming astropaths, desperate pleas for any nearby expeditionary fleets to divert and offer their vessels to aid in the evacuation. A response was received from the 15th Legion 17 hours later. By fortunate happenstance, Magnus and his 1,000 sons were traversing the outer edges of the system and offered their assistance. Barely a decade out from its sabbatical in Prospero, the 15th Legion fleet was yet to rebuild its full strength and would require additional help to ensure as much of Morningstar's populace was saved as possible. 54 days later, the 4th Legion arrived. Ezek Ariman wished he had seen Kalina in its prime. The city's architecture was a style that evoked memories of a world he left decades ago, which he knew he would likely never see again. He imagined this was what cities at mankind's peak must have been like: graceful, well-proportioned, harmonious in their reverence for what had come before and cognizant of the coming future. A hard rain was blowing in from the ocean, freighted with hot fumes of the thousands of lighters, barks, transits, shuttles, and atmospheric lifters ferrying them, women and children, to ships in the orbit. The sky was a furious mix of purple, orange, and pink, the churning atmospherics and the sheer mass of metal transforming it into something unpredictable and dangerous. Jet wash and arcing contrails crisscrossed the clouds, together with flashes of lightning and the slow dance of distant spots of light. Warships and geostationary low orbit. The wide tree lined street he and his opposite number from the Iron Warriors were marching along was known locally as the Boulevard of Firmaments. Each of its individual cobbles was patched with a celestial arrangement visible from one of Morningstar's many observatories. However, none of those cobbles could be seen due to the tens of thousands of frightened, rain soaked people moving miserably along its length en route to the gates of the starport. At 100-meter intervals, armed legionaries kept the packed crowds of refugees moving and contained. The same scenes were played out every day on every major street of Kalena. Space Marines, marching the day's randomly allocated rota of evacuees from the camp set up around the city towards the starport. Assessing the Mechanicum's estimates of how long Morningstar had left were accurate, Perturbo's genius for logistics would ensure the majority of its people were off-world before the planet's impending doom. Ahriman knew there had been protests at the heavy-handedness of the Primarch's plan, but when the first batches of refugees were lifted into orbit on schedule, most died away. Most, but not all. Ahriman knew there had been protests. Scattered doomsayers in the golden, lightning-embossed robes of the scions of Shaitan occasionally hectored refugees from rooftops or makeshift pulpits. Swift action was taken whenever such troublemakers were encountered. Yet, their message appeared to be gaining traction with a small minority of Morningstar's populace, who began leaving the camps and making their way to the regions of greatest danger in search of lethal rapture. Yet, for all the Colt's doomsaying, Ahriman sensed little panic among Morningstar's people. Uncertainty, yes. Fear, undoubtedly, but not panic. Whatever geological failings Morningstar had as a planet, its people were displaced citizens of the Imperium and stalwart in the face of adversity. He had sensed no psychic potential among the population around him, which was unusual, but not without precedent. "We need to get them moving faster," said Ahriman's armored companion on the other side of the street. His iron yellow and black armor glistening in the rain. He spoke over their internal vox, scanning the crowds with a calculating gaze. "I'm getting word of backlogs and choke points all across the city. These are ordinary people, not livestock, Forex," said Ahriman. "Nor are they legionaries. They do not march as we march. If we goad them to greater speed, we will only turn their fear into full-blown panic. Then people will die." Forex was an Iron Warrior. A legion Ahriman knew little. Ahriman knew had little patience for mortal fobiles. He had fought alongside elements of the Fourth twice, but it was in the days before either legion had been reunited with its Primarch. For the Thousand Sons, that great day came 13 years ago. It was barely 4 in the case of the Iron Warriors. "They should be afraid," said Forex. "Fear is a great motivator. Hope is a better one." Ahriman sensed Forex's bite back in caustic retort. "You disagree?" "I do. But this is not the time for idle banter," said Forex. "My Primarch's timetable allows for no leeway." "I believe it is the planet's self-destructive timetable we ought to be more concerned with," said Ahriman. "Can your Primarch plan for that too?" He sensed Forex bristle at the implied insult to his Genesire and added, "I meant no insult." Then you should think before you speak, said Forex. No warrior of the thousand suns would do otherwise. Implying the fourth does not? Artemon sighed. The fourth were a legion of methodical mindsets, quick to find fault in others. How might the influence of their Primarch mitigate that? No, Forex, and if you persist in seeing insults in my every utterance, where none are intended, then this is going to be a very long day, said Ahriman, diffusing the color in the Iron Warrior's aura with a gentle psychic pressure. I apologize, Legionary Ahriman. My name is Azek. Kyotomor, said Forex. My name is Kyotomor. The Harvest Dawn lifted from the utmost radio platform on a trail of dirty jet wash. Her ascent was erratic as she fought Morningstar's gravity before her engine stabilized and she hauled her ungainly bulk onto her assigned flight path. Vashti Eshkol watched the Agahaller climb into orbit through the armor-glass windows of Kalania's orbital command center, hoping against all reason the vessel's primitive drive units would get her into orbit. Vashti had grounded the Harvest Dawn for a mandatory refit several months ago, but Primarch Perturabo's evacuation plan demanded every vessel, no matter how dilapidated, must be pressed into service. Scutari Forger cohorts were combing every breaker yard, silo, and hive swamp within 600 kilometers for anything that might manage even one trip into space. I detect elevated adrenal levels in your bloodstream, Commander, said Magos Teresa Rom, speaking from the center of the chamber. Are you surprised? Said Vashti, making her way back to her own command station. A simple brass-faced console, inset with numerous data slates. From here, she could interface directly with each departing ship's avionics, direct the starport's defense guns, and observe the intricate ballet of departures. Not even a little, said Rom. Every launch sees your adrenaline levels spike. It is a classic fight-or-flight response, significant hormonal cascade, increased blood pressure, and heightened levels of neurotransmitters. Fight or flight? I don't know what I'd rather do, said Vashti, watching the Harvest Dawn's trajectory as it passed from the troposphere to the atmosphere, or rather the stratosphere. In 60 seconds, it would be someone else's responsibility. Fight, said Rom, and Vashti grinned. Always, she said. But for now, I think I need to take something to take the edge off. She pressed her hand onto the skin of her collarbone, haptic implants behind her fingertips, activating the implanted reservoir of biostabilizers. She blinked suddenly at the clarity of her vision and felt her pulse steady. And now you are calm again, said Rom. Good. Rom's station was elevated behind hers. The Mechanicum Adept's chimeric form suspended in a full-body harness at the center of a sphere of neurotrophic data streams. Ocular neural implants allowed Vashti to perceive what Rom was seeing, and she winced every time she saw how dangerously overcrowded her airspace had become. Her 30-strong staff of techs and servitors were strung out and exhausted from coordinating the enormous volume of traffic from ground to orbit. Most were working on stims and could suffer terrible withdrawals when the evacuation was done. Some might not even survive, but not one had complained at the daunting task before them. She quickly identified the Harvest Dawn's track, a steady climb towards the low anchors of the Iron Warrior fleet lines. Barring something catastrophic, the Agra hauler would soon be unloading its 8,000 passengers. The Dawn is more than 6 centuries old, said Vashti. She's a rust bucket that ought to have been mothballed decades ago. It's only hope and blind faith that keeps her aloft. The Harvest Dawn is well past its allotted service years, agreed Rom, but such tolerances will be waived in the face of current circumstances. She's made 12 round trips already. We're pushing our luck just to make a 13th. Is that superstition? Asked Rom. Common sense, answered Vashti. It is much the same thing. Is that humor? Experience, said Rom. Circuit Hub, Ellipson 5 Alpha, requesting handoff, said Rom as the Harvest Dawn's orbital track flashed amber. I see. Authorization granted. Let them have her. Preparing to hand off orbital controllers aboard Iron Blood, said Rom. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. The flashing amber track changed to a solid blue. Another one away, cried Karina Moreno, one of Vashti's senior orbital controllers. She punched the air, revealing a porcelain smooth augmetic arm, painted with coiling serpents, and a horse chair went up from the command center staff. What's next on the slate? Asked Vashti. The Gallant and the Voss Shermatov, replied Moreno, bringing up a pair of wireframe hololiths and technical specifications. A pair of dirty Promethean rigs that lent quare of the equatorial Magnustorm. Promethean rigs. Wonderful, sighed Vashti. I'm sure they'll be totally safe to launch. What a bit of heavy-handed foreshadowing. That is pretty heavy-handed. I'm very pleased to meet Forex in his dare I say juvenile state. I think he shows up far later. And in fact, maybe in the next novel I read, he'll be in that one. I can tell the difference in this author compared to the last one. It doesn't read quite as quickly. The pace is different. Arteman and Forex passed into the grand processionals of the western districts en route to the starport. Vapor pillars of departing vessels columned the volatile sky, and a nimbus of flickering energy hazed the air above the cliff-like dorsal surfaces of the Lux Ferrum. Rain was still falling in an ionized flood, and Ahriman felt a momentary flicker of prescience, seeing another storm wind rack city lashed by rain in its final moments. With names exchanged, a bridge of sorts had been established between Ahriman and Forex, and they spoke now with the halting cadences of men who might yet be brothers. Were you born on Olympia? Asked Ahriman, as they passed beneath a polished oscillate arch, commemorating the arrival of the Crusade fleets in Morningstar system. No. I am one of the few remaining Iron Warriors to have been born on Terra, said Forex. I spent my boyhood in the shadow of the great mountain of Ait Mor, but my heart is Olympian. As I set foot on its rocky uplands, I knew I was home. What is it like? Ah, how can I describe our home? Said Forex, fond memories rendering his aura a warm, honeyed color. It is a world to lift the soul, Asek. Endless mountains of dark beauty and sweet-smelling stands of highland fir, as far as the eye can see. It sounds magnificent, said Artiman. It is, agreed Forex. But it's not a world to take lightly either. Olympia is a harsh and testing world, a world that is not kind to the weak. The black rock of the mountains is hard and unforgiving, and it does not yield easily to pick or hammer. But prove your mettle, and you will know what it is to be a worthy man. Yet, even as Olympia lifts you, it reminds you of your place in the universe. How so? Said Armin, feeling a flutter of discord. Somewhere within the trudging crowds, the sensation was fleeting, for the people of Morningstar had minds blunted to psychic probing. Ariman had eased his consciousness into the Corvidae thought forms, hoping to catch a stray future echo. The mountains of Olympia have existed for millions of years, and they will exist for millions more, said Forex. No matter the affairs of men, their struggles and their triumphs, the mountains will endure. To know what makes a man humble, for he will be gone before the mountains are dust. Ariman was surprised by the poetry of Forex's words, having not suspected the Iron Warriors of having much of an appreciation of life's transient nature. I should like to see Olympia someday, he said. You should. It would do you good to feel humility. Are you suggesting I am arrogant? Forex laughed, the sound like metal grinding on metal. Ottoman sensed Forex did not laugh much. Can any of us say we are not? But you, Thousand Sons, hold yourself above all others as scholars and visionaries, warriors who put a greater price on knowledge than all else. You say that like we are to be viewed with suspicion for qualities most would consider a virtue, Ottoman pointed out. Forex laughed. I do not say that to anger you, Azek, only to point out that any man who ascends to the ranks of the legions Astartes needs to be humbled every now and again. We transhumans are like gods unto mortals, but we need a little humility to remind us of the purpose for which we were wrought by the Emperor, beloved by all. Anger touched Ahriman. He sought to quell it by rising into the first enumeration. Forex had pleased Ahriman with his insight, so he had no right to be angry with him for speaking honestly. You are right, my friend, he said. The Thousand Sons are sometimes guilty of hubris, for we are seekers after truth, and such a quest sometimes requires us to set ourselves apart from our brothers. Nothing should set a man apart from his brothers, said Forex. That is surely the greatest truth. But I see my words have angered you, and that was not my intention. Accept my apology, and we will talk of your world, yes? I wish to hear of Prospero. Ottoman's humors were still unbalanced, but he was not in the bilious fire of color that came to the fore, and the black confusion of melancholia. Prospero is a place of mixed emotion for me, said Artiman, startling himself with his need for honesty. When we first came to our Primarch's homeworld, it was a broken legion. I remember it perfectly, but I do remember is that we were dying. Dying? Said Forex, genuinely shocked. Yes. A sickness had taken hold of us. I think it almost destroyed us. Is that why there are so few of you? Yes, the Emperor led us to Prospero, where we were reunited with our Primarch. But in truth, I remember little of that meeting, or much of what happened in its aftermath. Aye, it is said that men in the presence of the Emperor find their memories afflicted, said Forex. It was not what Ahriman meant, but he did not correct the Iron Warrior. Sleek sweat, like a layer of frost, sheened his skin at the memory of agonies he had been enduring at that moment. Every fiber of his being directed at holding back the horror of something so terrible he dared not name it. All I remember is Magnus the Red taking a knee and swearing an oath before his father. It was a glorious time for us, a time of rebirth, but I barely recall the months following the meeting. I feel the same thing, said Forex. We met the Lord of Iron in the rain just like this. Damocos presented his adoptive son to his true father atop the blinded citadel. What was your Primarch's oath? That I remember, said Ahriman, pleased to be asked a question he could answer without a vague feeling of unease or the notion he was revealing his legion's secrets. I shall never forget it, said Magnus. As I am your son, they shall become mine. Then he took the Emperor's hand to accept primacy of our legion. That was the moment we truly became the Thousand Sons. But tell me of your world, Asik, said Forex. Speak of Prospero's heart, the soul that lives in its stone. My world is Terra, and in truth I saw little of Prospero's landscape. Our legion was rebuilding its ranks, learning our true potential from our father and welcoming back to the ranks many we thought lost to us. These were heady days, you understand. Our legion was on the verge of extinction. But Magnus had saved us. We were reborn and our lives given fresh purpose. Ahriman's words trailed off as he sensed the flare of emotion in the crowd once more. Forex immediately saw the change in him, and he brought his weapon up. What is it? What do you see? Nothing. I see nothing. Your posture says otherwise. Ahriman looked down and saw he had drawn his weapon without conscious thought. A bolt was chambered. His finger curled around the trigger and was ready to fire. His Corvidae senses were afire, and he traced the glittering lines he saw in his mind. There back a moment, where he might pull the trigger. There! Said Forex, and Ahriman looked to see a man break from the crowd. The clamber up the statue depicting Dajan Turin, Morningstar's first Light King. He clambered onto the statue's plinth and threw off his storm cloak to reveal an ochre-clad robe threaded with images of golden snakes. Ahriman recognized the symbol of the sons of Shaitan. Glory of rapture be upon you, screamed the man, one hand holding onto the statue's leg, the other raised in a fist. Our time of ascension is upon us. We are the blessed ones. We are the chosen people who can choose to rise to join the Storm Lord. His tempests shake the heavens. His return splits the land. Can you not feel him? Ahriman recognized the symbol. Few among the crowd paid him any heed, but Ahriman sensed more minds than he would have expected responding to the zealot's words. Our world missed its chance once, when a lightless age of strife descended upon the galaxy, and raised others to his golden palace among the stars. But the Storm Lord is nothing if not merciful. He bestows his wonder of strife upon us again. He offers us this chance to be with him. We were denied the chance and the rapture of the old night, but the sons of Shaitan beseech you now. Look to the skies and see the signs of his coming. Welcome them and embrace his golden apocalypse. Ahriman pushed into the crowded street, anxious to shut the demagogue down before his words created panic. I could end this with a headshot, said Forex, shouldering his bolter. Ahriman heard the click of a target link and knew Forex would not miss. No, he said, I must stop him. He drew a breath of power, feeling the energies of the great ocean suffuse his flesh. It touched none of those around him as they fled before a swift advance. Some were jeering at the man, attempting to drown out his doomsaying, but many more were in turn heckling those trying to shout him down. The man saw Ahriman and Forex advancing toward his perch upon the statue's plinth and jabbed an accusing finger at them. Look! The warriors of Crimson and Iron have come to our world to steal this moment from us, to deny us our rightful place at his side. They herd us like cattle into the vaults of their ships to take us from our homes. Do you know where they are taking you? Will they tell us? No! They claim that they are protectors, but I will tell you that they are demons given faces. They are traitors who walk in the darkness between the stars, come to enslave us. Ahriman extended his will and closed the man's throat with the merest nudge of kind force. The man's words were silenced, and his eyes bulged as he fought to draw breath. Ahriman could have killed them, but he had no wish to murder the man, just deprive him of oxygen long enough to render him unconscious. But the raving demagogue was not denied his martyrdom. He pulled out a snub-nosed auto pistol from his robes and placed it to his forehead. No! Shouted Ahriman, but his even transhuman reflexes could not stop what happened next. The man pulled the trigger and blasted his brains out at the watching refugees. At the man's death, a host of people in the crowd threw off concealing cloaks to reveal serpent-stitched robes identical to the man's. Ahriman saw stubbers, auto rifles, stubbers, and hatchets. The sons of Shaitan fell upon the refugees in a frenzy of gunfire and slashing blades. Demagogue. Demagogue, what a word. What a word. Demagogue. What a word, demagogue. What a word. I guess it's all about perception. I can imagine now why demagogues are so potent because, well, they're not overtly dangerous, but what they lead to can be. for all involved. Hathor Mat was well aware of the lesser mental capacity of mortals, but this was beyond the pale. The old man before him was trembling in fear, holding himself upright with a wooden stave, carved in the form of an elongated viper. Despite his physical frailty, he looked up at Hathor Mat with a defiance that was quite out of character and those facing transhumans. His name was Felix Tefra, and he was the elected spokesman for the horticultural collective on the fertile slopes of Mount Kailash. Dormant for millennia, Morningstar's geomagnetic upheaval had transformed the entire mountain into a crumbling powder keg on the verge of catastrophic eruption. Tefra stood before his people, some 500 agri-laborers and techs who were ignoring all sense and reason by refusing to be airlifted to safety, and the stormbirds of the Thousand Suns and Iron Warriors. The isolated community was little more than a score of simple portal-flame structures with corrugated roofs. It possessed only the bare minimum of technology required to operate irrigation systems and nutrient atomizers of its stepped fields. A winding rail track led back down the mountain, but Hathor Mat didn't think it had been used in years. He tapped the Legion insignia on his shoulder guard with his gauntlet. "I've been tasked with bringing you to safety," he said. "And we thank you," said Tefra, "but your efforts are unnecessary. We are..." Tefra's words were cut off by a hacking coughing fit. He bent down and could have collapsed before his staff. When he straightened back up and took his hands from his mouth, it was wet with black phlegm. Hathor Mat eased the measure of his psychic senses outwards, his perception of the man's biology superior to any Narthesium. Tefra's lungs were all but dissolved by mouths of breathing pyroclastic ash from the volcano's smoldering peak. Reaching out to place a hand on Tefra's shoulder, Hathor Mat let his Pavoni power flow into the man's flesh. It threaded damaged blood vessels all the way back into his chest, where it renewed damaged bronchioles and purged lung tissue of toxic materials. Tefra's breathing eased almost instantly, and he looked back at the legionary in wonderment. "Come back with us, and you will be healed." Tefra's wonderment fled from his face, and he took a step back. Hathor Mat had seen that look before, in the eyes of enemies trying to kill him. Surely this man would not be so stupid as to attempt something so suicidal. "Cease your temptations," hissed Tefra, his fist clenched in anger. "Leave our sacred mountain right now." His voice quavered, rich with giddy elation, as if he had passed some sort of test by spitting in the face of Hathor Mat's gift, as though dying here were the culmination of some long-awaited fulfillment. "You are aware of Magnus Tenkorix's readings, right?" said Hathor Mat, attempting another tack. He held out the slate upon which the Mechanicum's data, indicating Mount Kailash's inevitable fate, was clearly displayed. This volcano is going to explode, not just erupt and pour molten lava down its flanks, but explode. This mountain is going to cease to exist. He was careful to enunciate every syllable, lest there be any misunderstanding. My men and I have orders to bring you and your people to Kalania for immediate evacuation. Tefra shook his head. We are staying. That is an end to the matter. Hathor Mat let his awareness spread throughout the men and women gathered behind Tefra. He felt their determination to remain here, a blind righteousness impervious to anything so trivial as facts or reason. You're all going to die, said Hathor Mat, struggling to contain his anger in the face of such willful stupidity. Is that what you want? It is not about what we want, said Tefra. It is the will of the Stormlord. He will soon stand with us in radiance. The man's foolishness beggared belief. Hathor Mat laughed in his face. The Stormlord? Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? You are willing to die? To consign everyone here to death? Over folklore? You dare insult our faith? Said Tefra. When your faith is ridiculous, risks the lives of my men, and will get everyone here killed? Absolutely. Then we have nothing to talk about, said Tefra. Turning and rejoining his people, Hathor Mat watched, incredulous, as they made their way to the dirt-encrusted homes. He sighed, his anger turning to resignation, and turned back to the waiting stormbirds, 2 in the crimson livery of the Thousand Suns, and 5 in the steel dust yellow and black of the Iron Warriors. Abok Sakeo marched out to greet them. What is happening? Asked the Iron Warrior. Why are they not boarding the gunships? Hathor Mat climbed the assault ramp of the Stormbird. They're not coming, he said. What? Why not? They don't want our help. They want to stay. Hathor Mat felt Abok Sakeo's confusion discolor his aura. The Iron Warrior did not have the imagination to comprehend such illogical behavior. Truth be told, Hathor Mat was little better equipped to understand it as well. Ignorance is nothing to be ashamed of, he said. It can be undone by learning, but deliberate stupidity irritates me. Hathor Mat looked at the mountaintop. Boiling clouds of ash and lightning raged around the summit. Bands of purples, pinks, and sick yellows marched across the buckling sky. His scrying powers were weak in comparison to his newfound potency and biomancy, but Hathor Mat needed no seer sight to know that the volcano would soon obliterate every living thing within hundreds of kilometers. They will all die here, said Abok Sakeo. Yes, they will. So what are we to do? We let them, snapped Hathor Mat. The street was full of screams. Bodies lay at awkward angles. The ground was slick with blood. Men and women ran from their attackers, but bullets and blades met them at every turn. Husbands sheltered wives and mothers. The sons of Shaitan showed no mercy, turning their weapons on the young and the old, the strong and the weak. Ottoman's first shot all but obliterated a man carrying a weapon with a long perforated barrel. The man had been killed, but not before he had brought down at least a dozen people with indiscriminate fire, chanting a heathen catechism with each pull of the trigger. His body came apart, blown open by the explosive power of Ottoman's mass reactive bolt rounds. His second shot ripped through three men in a welter of shattering bone and pulped organs. The deafening echoes of bolter fire overshadowed all other sounds, and every head churned at the deafening reports. People threw themselves to the ground, crawled behind what little cover the streetscape offered. The gold-robed killers turned their guns on the two legionaries. Bullets sparked from their armor, but such low-power weapons could do little more than scratch the paint from their plates. A bolt shell detonated, and another gunman was ripped apart from the inside. Ottoman saw the murkier bright halos of zeal and certitude surrounding the murderous men and women. His seer sight was better than any reticule in his helm visor. His targets were picked out unmistakably. He fired twice more, killing two attackers. Forex matched his movements, advancing at his right shoulder. He fired with the metronomic regularity of a forged hammer, putting foes down with every shot. They waded through screaming refugees, twin giants, with fire spitting from their weapons. A man wearing a blood-stained fright mask rose to his knees. A ricocheting fragment had ripped away most of the right side of his torso, leaving him hideously misshapen. He screamed as he fired a blitzing stream of high-caliber shells. They burst into flame the instant before impact, as Ottoman surrounded himself in Forex in a layer of superheated air. He extended his pyre thought form and hurled the man backwards, his golden robes ablaze. His screams were abruptly cut off as searing fires dragged the oxygen from his lungs and consumed his flesh with phosphex speed. He felt surprise flow from Forex, but spun around as his corvade senses flickered with a jagged vision of the statue upon which the demagogue had hectored the refugees. There, two masked men in golden robes with an Imperial Army-issue rocket launcher primed and ready to fire. He yelled a warning as the gunner pressed the launch trigger. The rocket streaked towards Forex. The Iron Warrior saw it coming. He braced and bent into the oncoming ordnance with a defiant roar. The warhead impacted dead center on his shoulder guard, exploding on impact with a percussive hammer blow. Ottoman threw an enclosing kind barrier around Forex. A storm of razored fragments engulfed the Iron Warrior, but remained trapped within Ottoman's psychic shield. The two men bent to reload their weapons with a speed that spoke of professional training, but they had already taken the best shot they were ever going to get. Ottoman pushed his thoughts into the eighth enumeration and the most warlike posture of his fellowship, and poured his psychic power into their mortal physiology. They screamed, clawing at the flesh from their bones, as superheated blood aerosolized from every pore and a stinking red mist. Skin slid like melting wax. Bones bent and snapped. Ottoman felt the power of the great ocean bleed out, exhaling as his combat instincts sought fresh threats. He registered no more gunfire or screams of terror. Weeping and pain were all that remained. He blinked away freeze frame after images of half-remembered truths, a corollary to such recklessness, such an expenditure of power. A brother lost to a terrible curse, a pain so great, his mind fled from its memory. A great and terrible God reaching deep inside him to push the horror down into the deepest vault within his mind. Memories close to the surface, and yet so far out of reach. Percussive pain settled in his marrow, and confusion surrounded Ottoman's thoughts. His mind rebelled at being forced to bear such a burden. A gauntlet steadied him as he swayed. Thank you, brother, he said. His vision grayed at the edges, and he knew not which of his brothers aided him. I have not wielded such power since Bezant. How did you do all that? Asked Forix.